Some modifications I can now make to existing hatch patterns. Let's say, for example, I didn't want this solid hatch. Maybe I wanted to show a different pattern. I'm going to zoom into this area here, and I'm simply going to double click on the hatch pattern, if at all possible. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Right now it has the line selected. I'm going to take that out, and what I'm going to try and do is, there we go, just pick on it and select properties, and from the properties I can change the pattern from this predefined to something different, such as the brick, for example, selecting OK. As you can see, it's changed that pattern to brick, but I need to modify the scale in much the same way I modified the line type scale with the previous example with the cabinets and the dashed lines. Again, personally, this scale should read proportions because we are modifying the proportions. And I always like to go with the 12 factor. And as you can see, it has applied that pattern instead of the other one. Closing this out. Sometimes it's also possible to make modifications to the hatch pattern by double clicking on it. It's tricky sometimes with the solid one especially, because you can't always get to it. So what I do with that is I try and do a crossing window on it, or I simply turn off the wall layer and double click, and that takes us into the hatch edit window. And instead of solid, I can go angle and OK this. Obviously, it indicates that the hatch spacing is too dense, so I'm going to double click on it again. Try angle again, and this time try a scale of 12 and OK that. And now it seems to be working a little bit better. Zoom previous and zoom previous. So there we have it. What I'd like to do though is go back to the solid hatch, and once again I'd like to remind you that I do have the wall layer turned off, so it's easier to pick the hatch patterns. What I'll do is double click on it, and I'm going to select Inherit Properties now. By picking this button, it indicates to select the associative hatch object, and that would be this hatch. So I pick on it. It comes back and indicates that that is a solid pattern. If I'd like to, I could preview. Of course, that's what I want. And I will right click to accept. And I'll do the same to this hatch pattern by double clicking on it. Inherit the properties of this one. It shows me the properties. I can select OK. And now I will turn on the A-wall layer once again. This time what's happened is, you can see the changes I made now make it appear as if the red line is missing. But it's not missing, it's just that the objects now reside above the existing lines. I have to make a change here, and what I'm going to do first is turn the wall layer back off, and then I'm going to select Tools, Display Order, Send to Back. I'm going to pick the two hatch patterns I just modified. I might as well pick this one too. And right click. The objects have been sent behind the wall layer. And now everything reads a little bit better. What else could I do with hatches? If we look at the Modify toolbar, down at the bottom there is an Explode command. Explode means that you can take a hatch pattern and break it up into its individual pieces. I do not recommend doing this with the concrete pattern or any other pattern that contains a lot of information. But for simple patterns like this user defined, I could select it and I can select explode. When I do that, the hatch pattern has been exploded into the individual line segments. Sometimes you need to do this, other times it's not necessary. So I'm going to undo and undo one more time, which actually took me back too far because now the objects appear above, or rather the wall layer is turned off. I can turn that back on and we're back. We're okay. Just trying to take control of my drawing file. The other thing I want to show you is I can double click on this object and change the angle to say 45 degrees and preview that. If you like what you see, right click to accept the hatch, which I have done. Or I can double click on it again and change it back to 0 and OK. All of these changes are possible, and it's best to try everything you can. The one thing I do want to point out is to remember the difference between the predefined and the user-defined. Predefined are those patterns that exist in Autocad, and user-defined are the ones that we create by changing the angle, by changing the spacing, and doubling it, and doing what's necessary.